UNEP.
Hello everyone, I am Alison Tattersall from the Primary Health Network. My position is Manager of Education and Workforce. I'd like to introduce you to Kat Ryan. Kat is a current MPA person in general practice, and also Kathy Bainey, and both are here representing UNE partnerships today. So Kat, tell us what it's like being an MPA. So what's life in a day as an MPA?
Sure. So I'll just preface this with I'm also a practice manager and I'm in a solo general practice. So I wear a lot of different hats. So for me as an MPA, I might be answering the phone sort of in reception, doing administrative tasks. Then I might be assisting on, I might be doing suture removal, or I might have to step in and do an ECG. In our practice, because we're a solo practice, my MPA role isn't scheduled, it's just ad hoc. And then I've got a receptionist who's training to be an MPA, so she handles all of our recalls and reminders. So on a daily basis, twice a day, she'll be looking at any patients that need to come back in for any recalls for clinically significant results. So she'll bring those patients and book them in so they can come in.
Thanks, Kat. In larger practices, we see the MPA role being designated out from the admin role, so they might do 3 days of MPA clinical work and perhaps a couple of days of admin work in the practice. Working in the treatment room, assisting with minor ops, with dressings. I think, Kat, you referred to sort of rooming the patients is what Kat calls it. So that means, when the patients arrive in the practice, making sure that their clinical observations are done and all that data is entered into their software where it needs to be, so that it can be extracted when needed. It's a busy role. It's a really useful role in general practice and other specialties.
Thank you. And Kat or Kathy, what is the advantage of having an MPA for the practice manager? So if I was a practice manager, why would I put on an MPA?
I think the first answer for me is workforce solution. We know that, general practice, especially rural and regional areas, workforce is an issue. So you want everyone working to the top of their scope all of the time, 100%. So if you've got an MPA in your practice, really means if you have registered nursing staff as well, that they're constantly face-to-face with the patients. They are spending a lot more time in direct patient care as opposed to those other clinical tasks that need to occur in your practice. So it is releasing them to really give good care to the patients as a whole of a team. And the same with your clinicians. An MPA can actually do a lot of that introductory work for health assessments and care plans, meaning that the doctors are still seeing patients while you're getting the patient ready for their health assessment appointment. Kat?
Absolutely, and I think it's also like splitting out tasks. So you're taking away some of those lower level tasks from the practice nurse. So for example, whether that's rotation of stock, like medical consumables, whether that's cold chain management, whether that's getting patients to fill in consent forms, things like that. MPAs that they can be assisting with it essentially becomes workflow, like increasing workflow, increasing time efficiency, which leads to increasing dollars ultimately, because you're not wasting time.
Yeah.
And I also think because MPAs have a bit of that clinical understanding, instead of simply having a receptionist that's ringing a patient to make an appointment, or to make an appointment for either for recalls that need to come in, or whether it's for a health assessment or for care planning, the MPA can explain to the patient why they should come in, why it's good for their health, because they have a little bit more clinical understanding than simply just a receptionist. I think, you're ending up with a receptionist that can do clinical tasks, but that's not really what an MPA is. They have more of a grounding and more of an understanding that you've got a much better what do you say, like team member, you know, like they're more like they've got a better understanding of the why behind they're doing all these things. So.
Yeah, that's correct. I think also let's not forget about the skill sets and the units they study, the business units that they study, because that actually allows them to do a lot of the, let's call it operative administrative work, which will allow the practice manager to spend a lot more time on the strategic management roles that we often squeeze in when we should be spending some significant, time on getting our HR right, some business planning, business strategy. So having, this qualification in your practice really means that they can take responsibility for the billing, the processing, the reconciliations. They're really well trained to do all those sorts of things.
Absolutely. So, I mean, they're making it essentially the practice manager is also working at the top of their scope instead of having to capture those tasks. Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you see the MPA actually fitting into the team?
So I think we talked a lot about the role of the MPA in the practice, and I think when you look at the change management that's required to bring the role into the team, it's really important that everybody understands the MPA role. It's well defined, it's well communicated, and I mean communicated internally and externally, so that everyone that works in the practice understands the role and how it's going to be used in your practice, and that your patients understand the role and what that means for their care delivery if that's going to change. So communication is key. Your compliance requirements are also really important, so making sure that job descriptions reflect the role and actually reflect what the MPA is doing in your practice. If you have upskilled a receptionist, then making sure that that job description is altered to really reflect the accuracy of what they're doing. If they're taking on new tasks, then thinking about the fact that they may need, induction processes may need to be revisited so that they know how to use the equipment safely and that they're trained in using that equipment, and that's all recorded. And I think the other thing to think about there is that it's really important for accreditation that everyone who's using clinical equipment, we actually have that evidence to produce that they have been trained. So look, there's, it's the same fundamentals that you apply, I think, to bringing any role into a practice, and just think about what you need to do. So, your compliance needs to be in place. They need to be well trained. Whoever's taking on the responsibility for supervising the role needs to understand what that means, and they need to have agreed to it.
Absolutely.
Anything else?
I just also think that the MPA themselves, they enjoy it, because instead of just being at a desk all the time and speaking to patients over the phone or behind the desk, they actually get into the treatment room or they get into a consult room and they get to have that one-on-one time with the patient, and just doing those little, like we're doing basic clinical tasks. We're not being nurses, we're not being doctors, but simply doing an ECG, or, if they're data freaks like me, if they enjoy doing clinical measurements and inputting it and then seeing the data change. And also things like cold chain, stock rotation, things like that. It gives them variance in their job. So instead of simply doing a reception task, sitting at a desk all day, they can get up, they can go to the storeroom, they can have a look, they can get up, they can go into the consulting room, they can assist. And I think it's that job diversity which I think that's what I enjoy. I enjoy doing the little bits of clinical, and it's not all the time. I don't want to be a nurse. I just want to do these little bits and pieces here and there.
So if you were going to give a quick elevator pitch as to why we should have a medical practice assistant in our practice, what would you say?
It's a no-brainer.
Just do it.
It's a no-brainer. Just do it. Yeah, from a workforce perspective, from a HR perspective, from patient satisfaction perspective, it's well-trained staff. It's so important. Your team are your business, the face of your business. It's your people make or break your business. So a well-trained, well-qualified MPA, I think it explains itself.
Okay. Oh, I don't think I can top that. I'm very good at elevator pitches.
No, that's fine. So thanks for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.